The Houston Rockets are in limbo. In one fell swoop, the two biggest masterminds of their unique style of play have disappeared. China's favorite GM Daryl Morey is now with the 76ers and in charge of maybe two of the least Morey ball stars you can think of in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Meanwhile, small ball god Mike D'Antoni accepted a lesser role under his former pupil in Brooklyn. What's left of the Rockets' main brass is owner Tillman Fertitta, but COVID has significantly hurt the billionaire restaurateur's finances. I'm sure it isn't helping that the NBA is going to have a shortened season next year. But the Rockets do still have James Harden. And say what you want about his playoff success or lack thereof, Harden is still a surefire top 6 or 7 NBA player. Alongside Russell Westbrook, these two should still make a successful enough pairing to keep alive the Rockets' playoff streak of 8 years, which coincides with Harden's arrival in Houston. However, Harden's arrival in Houston was during the Morey era. He's, if anything, a product of the belief that Morey had in him. With Morey gone, new management may look at Harden as less of a golden boy than his pseudo-father did. They might consider his shortfall come playoff time and see greener pastures with him as a high-value asset on the wrong side of 30. That's important because the Rockets lost their 2024 and 2026 first-rounders to acquire Westbrook. Brook. I said Westbrook. Now, that's all speculation. The reality is that Tim McMahon already reported that the Rockets remain 100% committed to keeping James Harden. Trading Harden might not be the most logical play in the world simply because the team as already constructed should be a tough first round out in the Western Conference, and with the financial implications of COVID, it might be foolish to give up one of the league's most marketable stars. But the Rockets should at least field offers under new management even if they say otherwise. And considering the likely lack of major moves this offseason as sort of like a calm before the 2021 storm, they may change their tune on a Harden trade real quick. These hypotheticals provide a good look at what a Harden return could be like assuming he becomes available, and I promise you, they're so fun to think about. Before I start, what's up guys, it's Colin here, and a quick side note, if you hadn't known already, I'm actually from the Philippines, and we were recently hit by a massive typhoon called Raleigh, which killed many of my countrymen and affected up to millions of people in the Philippines. We are a third world country which has not handled the pandemic very well, so a lot of Filipinos are really suffering right now. We've decided to donate the earnings from this video directly to those affected by the typhoon, but we will also be leaving ways for you to donate through me, whether you're from the Philippines or outside it. Please do check those out in the description. I'll also be leaving some direct donation links down below as well in case you prefer that. But if you cannot donate, thank you for simply watching this video because you're already making a difference in someone's life. Now let me change the mood back to our fun hypotheticals, starting with the most obvious one, a Harden and Morey reunion in the city of brotherly love. I'll preface this by saying that this trade doesn't actually make a lot of sense for these teams, at least right now, simply because the pieces don't really fit stylistically. For Philly, Simmons will likely struggle with Harden handling the ball, but at least Harden is a clear-cut point guard. Plus, the idea of some added spacing once Harden slots in and Horford slides up to the 5 is at least worth experimenting with. For the Rockets, Embiid and Westbrook don't exactly scream anything more than a poor man's version of LeBron and AD, and that would just mean a parallel move for them. But the way I foresee this trade still actually happening is if both teams jump out of the gate slow next year and their front offices feel some desperate pressure to change, especially considering that both of them have experienced plenty of turnover over the last couple of months. And both teams can convince themselves of this trade simply by the way they perceive Joel Embiid. Embiid is one of the more polarizing stars in the league in terms of value. The issues with Embiid surround his health, having never played 65 games in a single season, which likely predicates from a lack of discipline to stay healthy. Then there's the fact that he's a mediocre three-point shooter who takes up a lot of space at the center position. However, there's another side to the coin with all of those things, and that's what the Rockets are going to be convincing themselves of. He's still just 26 years old, and with a career 24.8 PER that is the same as James Harden's career PER, Embiid still screams of elite talent. We are entering year 5, but there still looms the possibility of Embiid staying healthy and pulling in a monster season a la Anthony Davis last year. In that same vein, Davis showed that an improved three-point stroke of a once mediocre shooter allowed him to be an effective big man in the playoffs. Considering Embiid's overall effectiveness is hampered by the Sixers' spacing, there's reason to be optimistic that Embiid could still hit another ceiling, especially with the help of the Rockets' shooters. The Rockets could convince themselves of a need to change and lock in a younger star with an extra year on his deal. Richardson is part of the trade to make the money work, but he's an additional asset on the perimeter. So overall, they make a change, they stay competitive, and make up a bit of draft cachet. For the Sixers, they shake themselves off of the shackles of their Embiid-Simmons dilemma and get a bona fide superstar in a weaker conference. Harden automatically slots in as the third best player in the East behind Giannis and KD, and I just feel like Morey can find a way to milk value somewhere else within their pieces to bolster their supporting cast. And if it doesn't work, they could still potentially move Simmons, and while the idea of moving both Embiid and Simmons in a short amount of time may sound crazy, it wouldn't be too insane if you think of Harden with whomever else they could put around him leading a team in the East. Embiid could easily be swapped for Simmons in this trade, but McMahon also reported that the Rockets are emphatically uninterested in a Simmons for Harden swap. Simmons doesn't make a lot of sense for the Rockets anyway, since they pair him up with another star guard that can't shoot, but ironically shoots too much. Unless the Rockets can find a suitor for Westbrook immediately, which isn't a surefire deal based on his contract, Embiid is the better option of the two 76ers stars. Now, am I a fan of this deal? Not really. But if you squint hard enough, I could see both teams talking themselves into making this change. Ultimately, I think the Rockets are more likely to say no, but only because they may find themselves a better package with more long-term assets. This next trade is one such example. It's a crazy one, but hear me out when I say that I think this would make sense for both sides. The Pelicans drafted CP3 and he left when they couldn't build a contending team around him. Ditto for Anthony Davis. So why don't the Pels open Zion's championship window as early as next year by giving him a superstar and one whose tools could even maximize Zion as a player? Just think about Harden and Zion playing pick and roll over and over and over again. How deadly would that duo be? This trade essentially means the Pelicans go all in on win now mode players plus Zion. The big sell here is that the team will have a roster that features a big three of Zion, Harden, and Jrue Holiday, alongside key role players like JJ Redick, Derek Favors, Josh Hart, and Kenrich Williams, who will all be under the recent win now hire that was Stan Van Gundy. And remember, David Griffin is at the helm in New Orleans. He was also the one that facilitated the Wiggins for Love deal for Cleveland in 2015. Of course, LeBron is a different beast compared to Harden, but I think you get where I'm coming from here. Griffin has the balls to do this. The risk is of course that Harden and Holiday are gone after 2 years and the Pelicans are left with Zion and a roster of no-names. That's a very scary possibility, but is the risk really that different if the Pelicans decide to stand pat? The Pels are already good enough so that the draft isn't really the option for growth, so the hope of the current roster improving would rely heavily on Brandon Ingram. Ingram is of course coming off a monster year wherein he was an all-star and won most improved player after averaging 23, 6, and 4. The likely scenario for the Pelicans would be to keep him on a max or near max 4-year deal wherein the 23-year-old would work and develop with Zion. And Ingram is a great player, but while Ingram has shown that promise, he still has not been able to show proof of it when it matters. The Pelicans started 6-22 last year when he was the lead dog, and when Zion was in and out of the lineup during the bubble, Ingram's numbers dipped. Of course, he could still improve in so many ways given his age, so the question is, alongside Zion, do you take the next 2 years of Harden or the next 4 years of Brandon Ingram? And that's the question the Rockets should ask themselves as well. In this hypothetical, the Rockets would of course choose the latter. They essentially get back for Harden the same package the Lakers gave up for Anthony Davis, but with 2 less draft picks. But considering that Ingram's value has skyrocketed after last season, and Harden is older than AD, there's definite reason for the lesser return. What the Rockets lose in talent, they make up in acquiring a young all-star and 2 other decent young players to kickstart a rebuild. Then they can start to shop Westbrook to hopefully get any additional value as well. I personally love the idea of this trade happening, but I'm also just a writer, YouTuber, and NBA fan, and not the actual GMs with my job on the line. The first 2 trades kept the Rockets competitive, but for this one, well, rebuild started. The Rockets trade their franchise's best player, arguably since Hakeem Olajuwon, to get the first pick in this year's draft, alongside 2 other future picks to make up the ones they had already given up. They'll surely need to find another suitor for Westbrook if they make this trade, but that's all well and dandy since Anthony Edwards can come in and pair up with D'Angelo Russell in the backcourt from day one. The downside for the Rockets is that OKC has the right to swap picks with Houston in the 2021 draft, so there's not any real incentive to completely tank next season. And in a loaded Western Conference, a team led by Edwards and Russell may just find themselves at the bottom. But it can also be framed as though the Rockets just got their top pick a year early. They can rest well knowing they still have their 2022 and 2023 first rounders alongside the slew of picks the Wolves would give to them in this deal. Plus, a Westbrook trade could provide some financial flexibility and hopefully net some sort of long-term asset from a desperate team. As for Minnesota, this is a mortgage your future type of trade, but they may as well see Cat out the door once his contract expires in 2024 if they don't do some type of win-now move soon. I understand that they gave up some things to acquire D'Lo, but again, in a loaded Western Conference, that team, at best, is scrapping for the 8th seed. The Wolves will get at least 2 years of Harden, and alongside one of the best offensive bigs in the NBA, they could have the league's best offense. That would assure the franchise of 2 consecutive playoff berths, which is more than they've had in nearly 2 decades. And with all due respect to CP3 and Westbrook, Cat has the potential to surpass both of them as Harden's best teammate ever. Not because of skill, but because of fit. And that's why I honestly believe there's still a scenario wherein they can convince Harden to stay in Minnesota. And if not, maybe they can wiggle their way around giving one less first rounder to at least give themselves a little bit more of a long-term safety net. Those are 3 absolutely massive trade ideas for James Harden, but do leave a comment down below on your thoughts or any other trade scenarios you can think of for the beard. The odds of these actually happening real soon are probably pretty low, but I found the experiment to be really fun and I hope you enjoyed the video as well. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.